What do you mean first or Latino?
Ricardo,
Oh,
thank you for making some time. We're obviously on a stag for our boy Dre. It's been an interesting couple of days. The less said, the better. But yeah, I do a video podcast thing, talking with family and friends, mostly from the East London region. But you're a friend that's been had experiences in East London from elsewhere. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get as well into what you mostly do at the moment, working with kids in schools, and see where the conversation takes us. So I really appreciate you making time right now. Maybe start by introducing yourself and a bit of your background.
So I'm Ricardo. Currently a teacher. Currently working in Waltham Abbey, Essex. Been teaching for 10 years. I've worked in education for about 13 years in education, in and around behaviour. So I started by working with children with a lot of behaviour and emotional, social disorder needs, trying to regulate them. Then worked with transition of year 7s, year 6s into year 7, especially the weaker students who needed a lot more support. So that was my beginning part of education. And it got to a point where I was good at what I'd done, basically. I was good at what I was doing, and I wanted to reap more benefits, essentially, and went on to do my teaching course, and it's been that since, really. And that's a nutshell.
And what introduced, or what attracted you to it in the first place? Like what about that type of work was energizing or joyful, gave you joy?
It was actually a recommendation from people around me. It's not something I ever dreamed of, aspired to. I never wanted to be a teacher. But people around me, the way that I was helping them naturally, and their friends and their families or whatever, and growing up, quite a few people was like, "Oh, you'd be a good teacher. You should go into teaching." Da, 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 da. So to be fair, at the beginning part, it was more of something that I just dabbled with. I was doing a course actually, and I think it was a higher level teacher, a HLT, higher level teaching assistant or something like that. I took that course. I never finished the course, but that's why I ended up working in school, because I wanted to get the hands-on experience to complete the paperwork. And I never completed the course. I found it boring as hell. But that's kind of where it married up. But it was literally people suggesting. Shout out to the Ofsted family, because it was pretty much them. They know who they are. And yeah, then the rest wrote itself, really.
So that's what attracted you into it, and what kept you in there, particularly of the cohort of kids that you're talking about, the most challenged, the most...
I think the thing that kept me was the fact it changes all the time. It's a similar thing, but it does change year by year depending on that cohort. But I think one of the things that I remember the most from my early years, or my first years of teaching, even before the teaching, if I go to when I was doing like the mentoring and the behaviour issues, it was certain kids who the school had wrote off. They managed to get something, and it wasn't a lot, but they had something more than what they were expecting to get. So to some of them, even getting an E at that point, we use old money them tests like A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
So some of them getting D's and E's at that point was more than what they were expected to get.
They got A grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, pardon me. So it's the case of, don't get me wrong, I know that's not enough to open up every door for them, but they've still got something on paper, which was then why I decided to go into the school thing, and that was part of the journey. And then when I started teaching, again, it was a case of, in my first year, so my training year, I had 2 GCSE groups myself. I took on a 3rd GCSE group, which wasn't even my discipline.
And these are, again, like the most or tough, challenging kids?
No,
or
so
a mix?
This one was more of a mix at this point. So these ones weren't... You had the 1 or 2 odd students who were a bit challenging at this point. But as a cohort, they were fairly good, to be fair. They were quite supportive and wanted to do well. So it was just a matter of teasing it out and getting the right things out of them. But the one class that I picked up, they were That was a resistant material class. Funnily enough, there was quite a few black boys in that class. They were left to their own devices. It wasn't cultural at all. It was a case of that subject didn't have a firm teacher, so it was quite cover based. So they sort of was cover, so they didn't really engage in the learning and so on. Knock-on effect essentially. So for the last term, building up to their exams, I actually took that class under my wing. So I was a secure teacher at school, and I remember one guy, he ended up getting a D. And he was like, "Oh, sir, thank you." I remember like in August, like, "Sir, thank you, I got a D." And I was like, he's like, "Nah, I wouldn't have got a D without you, sir." You get me? So it's like, that was like, okay, cool, you know what? That's when you start realising some students appreciate the little things. And to them, that's better than nothing at all. Where, and then you got, on the contrary, you got some kids who you bend over backwards for, and they're not even trying to do enough to get the D or the E, you know. So it's a weird world. It's a very conflicting industry because you've got to kind of balance your professional opinion, your personal opinion, personal feelings, professional feelings, and essentially the school's goals all at once. So it's like...
And the school, the local authority, and the national government.
And the national government.
It feels like there's stuff you want to say about that. But let's pick up something you said about black boys. And I mean, obviously, as a black man yourself, there must be something of an impression. First of all, you know, role model to a degree. Could you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. So for myself, when I was in school, I enjoyed school. You know, I genuinely enjoyed school. There was only one teacher I had an issue with. Shout out to you. But yeah, I genuinely enjoyed school. You know, I spent the day with the majority of my friends. I went to lessons. I learned. I like being smart. I like knowing stuff. You know, so we're hand in hand. Most of my teachers were cool. Shout out Miss Lauza. Anyway, but, I didn't realise. I never realised I didn't have a black teacher until I had a black teacher. So until I had one, I never realised I didn't have one. So in primary school, it was just white people. Majority of white women. To be fair, in year 5 and year 6, I had the two white men teachers in the school. I had both of them. But in secondary school, I was just bare white people. And I never really thought nothing of it. Never, ever thought anything of it until Mr. Letman started working with us. And I was like, "Rah, there's a black guy. Like, we've got a black teacher." And that was a moment for me. And he's cool. Like, we still kind of kept a link nowadays because the life journeys, he played a role. You know, I don't think he realised that at the time, but he played an important role in me. And so that was cool. So then when I've become a teacher, my thing is I want to be the teacher that I didn't have, possibly needed, and what I extracted from the good teachers. So what I got from them, like Miss Ferguson, Mr. McDonald, they were dope. So I still talk about Mr. McDonald. Like one of the lessons he taught me, I still use that. You know, Mr. Wigley, he hooks me up to this day with education still. So I had a good foundation of teachers, and I extracted all the good stuff. I want to use that. What I didn't get, I want to use that. And yeah, just try and build that bridge, because I think as I got older, I've understood the importance of representation as I've got older. When I was younger, I don't really think I got it. And I think being who I was, representation that mattered to me doesn't really matter. You know, I was more of the representation for badness, so to say. And obviously, we've got all the, like, as an adult, you understand, you've got the ramifications and glorifications in the music and the videos and blah, blah, blah. and it's not that they're telling you to do something, but it's what we're exposed to.
Yeah,
You know?
and it's glorifying
It's glorified
to a degree.
So all of that is almost becomes the aspiration. You know, we're indirectly or directly that becomes the aspiration. So to give students more aspiration, that's not what you see on TV and like, do you know that this is available and have you thought about that one, and making my lessons linked to an actual career and showing them how this isn't going to get you directly there, but this is the first step on your journey. That's what you're interested in. To me, that is what I like to do now. And I think there was a moment where I didn't even really focus on the black kids because the schools I worked in were heavily black. So I was doing my thing, and my audience, so to say, could identify with me and I could identify with them. Naturally, it was very organic, so I didn't have to think about things, you know, and I was very comfortable to phone a parent and them to, they knew I was a black man, and even the way the parent would interact with me was different, because they'd say certain things that they probably wouldn't say to the head on whatever, you know, it's like that. And I think like recently now, where I've come out of Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Finchley, even Finchley, I had a lot of black kids in Finchley, but black kids wasn't even at the highest rate. It was more like Middle Eastern kind of. But again, culturally, they want to learn, and their parents want like their parents are doctors and lawyers and they're on a dentistry, and so the aspiration levels are high. But now, where I'm working now is the first school I've worked in all this breadth of time, where it is like a high white population of students, and it's very different.
Different dynamics.
Very different.
Well, just before we get there, maybe just going back a step. So, I mean, there's a few questions I want to ask there, but the one that comes first to mind, I suppose, is, do you think there are a lot of other black male teachers in schools, and or do you think there needs to be more, particularly in urban areas like East London, from your experience?
So I think it's becoming more of a thing. I know there's a network of black male teachers now that you can find them on Instagram or whatever, but there's a network of black male teachers who are trying to build that profile. I do think it's like in South, I think there's a high representation in South. There's a school, I can't remember what it's called. I went to work there for a day. I was doing like a workshop there for their kids, and I found it like amazing. It's like the head was black, the deputy was black. It's like the head was a black man, locks. I was like, wow, you know. I said, I want to work here. Oh, it's too far to commute, but little things like that, for me, it's beautiful.
Representation matters.
Yeah. So it's like for young children to see somebody in a position of power, that's a natural aspiration. Doesn't mean that they want to be a head teacher, but they've seen that they can be a leader. You know, okay, I can actually be the top of a food chain in somewhere, which I never saw growing up. Yeah. You know.
And so maybe let's also go back to growing up.
Yeah.
And there's some things you may not want to say, and that's fine. Perhaps give us a bit of a potted history as well about you growing up, where you were, some of the movements, because I feel like you've been around a lot of England, Midlands,
I've done a lot. So to put it in a shell, it was like born in the Midlands, lived my first teen years in the Midlands, moved to London, a few family issues and dynamics and whatnot, so I moved to London, stayed with one of my aunts for a while, grew up quick, so that's when I was in Hither Green in Lewisham, so I had to learn to grow up quick there. Came back to the Midlands, continued, and then when doing life in the Midlands, life catches up with you, and then I was like, my life's going one of a few ways right now, and it's not the greatest outcome. So then I made a decision to move back to. In my head, it was London, but it wasn't really London. That was Hertfordshire. And in my head, Hertfordshire was going to be nice. No one's going to know me. I'm not going to know no one. It's going to be quiet.
Chance to reset almost. Yeah.
Or fully reset button. That point for me, it was literally a death or jail situation, in my opinion. Some people might say I'm exaggerating it.
But there's details behind that which clarify that, which I know, but we can't commit to camera, and that's fine. Yeah.
So I thought Hertfordshire was going to be a nice reset. I thought what I perceived the university to be and what it was, two different worlds. So it was just like the badness just moved, and I was bad with new badness, you know. Which was still. I was too excited by it though. That used to excite me a lot, so I didn't mind it. Never scared. But then, so there was that. Then I was in London. Then I was in Stratford at that point. So I went from Hertfordshire to Stratford, stopped in Stratford for a while. From Stratford, then I went to West London. Then I went back to the Midlands. Then back to Enfield and North. That's where I am now.
Been
so
around.
Like,
and I suppose that richness and that authenticity about the darker side of or harder parts of life allows you to speak to the young kids, the young black kids, with the thing that other people can't reach.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's important in schools, because there's not to use names, we'll just say like Mrs. A and Mr. B, just B's, but Mrs. A is. I'll use the word institutionalized. Yeah, so she's been to school. She got a GCSE. She's been to college or university. She got her degrees. She's gone into a job. She's followed the rules and regulations, and she's climbed the ladder. And it's very linear. Yeah, but she's got no life experience. In not that she hasn't got experience, because I'm sure she's gone through her things, but she hasn't gone through things where she can relate to child A, B, and C.
Which in boroughs like Bow, Stratford, West Ham, Tower Hamlets, there's a reality, Barking, there's a reality that a lot of the kids there, I think, 1 in 6 are in poverty, etc., etc. So in the school settings, they more than often will need someone who can speak to that life, that experience, and then can identify
and that's the thing,
and relate.
And they won't listen to teacher A, not because they don't. Some teachers need to get off their high horse as well, but it's not a case of that child not respecting you. It's that child doesn't believe you. It's not that I don't respect you, miss. It's not that I don't like you. I just don't believe you because you can't identify with me. You've had breakfast every day. I might not have. You're putting me in detention because I haven't got stationery. I haven't got stationery because my mum ain't got the £1 to £70 line. Like, good morning about me being in trainers. They actually were donated to me. I haven't got shoes because I can't afford shoes. And it's that side of the coin where, and I mean, it's another stretch where schools are becoming academies and start running by like maths and all sorts of stuff. But because they've got so many policies put in place, their policies do not allow for there to be real life issues. Like, and the thing what I found in London as well, pretty much more south and east as opposed to west and north, is the fact that, I mean, as an outside Londoner coming into London, I see the map differently. And I mean, to me, I can separate the London map culturally, because it's literally
slightly different pockets, and
it's like
dynamics.
Black, South African and Australian, Somali, and then a bit of everything brick and brack, and then we go back to like Middle Eastern and Turk and Cypriot and Jewish, and then bit of everything back to Caribbean and Africa and Asia. So it's like you can separate the map, and it's not by accident. It's not by accident.
People often congregate where other people have settled.
Where people are settled. Where people have come over from before and then send for their people. Then it makes sense. I get it, but it also follows. I mean, I don't know facts and figures, so I don't want to. I'll use the word poverty very loosely because I don't know facts and figures, but I know more people in South and East who are out of their house way before their child's even woken up because they've got to get to work, and like people in South East, they ain't really got a decent line of public transport, so they've got to they've got a longer maneuver just to get to the same place, So it's like I know young children who have taught or been around who's woke up and haven't seen mum. And it's a shame. I want to say mum and dad, but that's just dynamics of families. Sometimes,
more often than not, yeah.
But so they woke up and mum's not there. Little note, make sure you lock the door and da. And then by the time they finish school and come home, they've got a 2, 3, 4 hour window before mum's even coming home. Because mum's got to do that big commute home. So it's like...
Well, and that was my experience, and it's not even just the commute at home. Sometimes, like, it was my experience was because of the second job. Yeah.
You get me? So it's a case where we've got kids who they're no longer being raised. They're raising themselves, and then you'll get someone jump online and we're like, oh, where are the parents and the children have got no manners. But this is where it becomes a big issue because these families have to work X amount of jobs. And it's another thing, it's like, when you're working 2 jobs, and this is where I think it's all applied. I've worked 2 jobs, I've worked 2, 3 jobs, and I'm not shy of hard work. But you shouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to be okay. Like in this day and age, in England, you shouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to be okay. And that's a bigger, like I don't want an assassination, but that's a big government issue as far as I'm concerned. No way. And again, I haven't got facts and figures, but I know from people who have gone abroad to work in other places that they don't need 2 jobs. And I know people who have married and moved away for work, and it's a case where they're in the best situation now because he gets paternity. His paternity is great. Like he's basically working for the next 6 months. He's working like part-time, but paid full-time.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. I wish we could go into that. I know as well. There's a party to go to, unfortunately. So, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I really wanted to make sure we touched upon some things we chatted about over drinks and that.
Yeah.
So going back to the education side of things,
yes.
Your thoughts about the future, like let's kind of wrap up there.
Ooh,
future of education. We said I was going to touch on Ofsted, for example.
Yeah.
So I don't know which one of those you want to start off with, Ofsted, and your thoughts about that kind of thing.
Let's start with Ofsted.
Okay.
Start with Ofsted. So my personal opinion with Ofsted is I understand the need for measurements. So I understand the rules and regulations, people to get tested and assessed to make sure that they are of a certain, I get that. But for that to put that much pressure on people as individuals or as a unit to then lose sleep, unfortunate circumstances where that teacher took her life.
And just for context, for those that don't know, this is on the back of a teacher who killed herself a month or 2 ago now, a while ago, who killed herself because 6-7 weeks ago, because an Ofsted report was coming out that damned the school. It wasn't very glowing of the school.
Wasn't very glowing of the school. And this is the thing as well, it's like I'm a person, like, in Perry Beaches, my lesson was part of the Ofsted report, and it got a good report, like it was a good lesson with outstanding features, and I'll always boast about that, because that was my early years of teaching, and I was like, yo, Ofsted said my lesson was this and that. But to every yin, there's a yang, you get me? So as great as my lesson is, someone else they're not getting that report, and that person is going to be left to feel away. Because I make no bones about it. No one teaches for the sake of teaching. And in your early years, if you can plan your lesson in a couple less than a couple of hours, I would take my hat to you. Because I was taking hours to plan a lesson. I was taking 4 or 5 hours to plan 1 hour's piece of work. So for them to then come along, and it's the same as anything. Everyone has a good day. Some people can have a bad day. That person might have had no sleep last night because they were worried about today, and now little Johnny's coming to school and his mum didn't give him his medication and this lesson's gone wrong, and it's a bad day for everyone. But you've now said that it's inadequate, and for someone to say that you're inadequate, blood, that's horrible.
Deep. That's deep, isn't it?
That's horrible. You are inadequate of doing something that you've been doing for so many years.
Yeah.
And people thank you and you've got through, but on a snapshot, I'm going to say you're inadequate. And that's going to be reflected because everyone's going to see, wow, that's horrible.
So from your position right now and experience so far, what's the potential alternative? Or what looks like an alternative? What are the things that lead to an alternative regulation regime, inspection regime?
I think the inspection, I don't think the inspection needs to change. I think the language needs to change because, I don't know if people know Ofsted or whatever, but Ofsted don't always look at the same thing. So, for example, me and you got a school, and when they've come to your school, they've looked at your English baccalaureate, humanities, and your school leadership. I want to focus on the safeguarding. I want to make sure your safeguarding is good. But they'll come to my school and they want to look at how your BTEC's doing, your behaviour management process, and your safeguarding. Okay? So we're now looking at different strands within the school. Your safeguarding's 100. My safeguarding's pretty good. It's not 100, but it's good. Okay, cool. But everything else now, we're going to get marked differently but we're looking at 2 different games. It's like, how can I mark your hockey skills against my football skills? You know what I mean? It don't make sense. So it's either got to be, we're coming in to look at A, B, and C across the country, and that's our grading for this year. So during 2022, Ofsted will focus in highly on school leadership and key skills or key subjects, core subjects, English, science and maths across the UK. And in those categories, this is it. The playing field's even. But if we're going to go in and say, this school we're going to look at A, B and C, but this school we're going to look at D, E and F, you're outstanding and you're inadequate, but we're not marked on the same things, because we could actually be outstanding in the same fields. We could actually be inadequate in the same fields, but we looked at 2 different things. It's not fair.
No. Interesting.
It's not actually a fair process.
Yeah.
And then it's like to then put that out and use that as a almost like dangling a carrot to if your child chooses this school, because essentially bums on seats is your money in the school. So if I get 200 kids in my school in year 7, I don't get the money for them in year 7. I get the money for them in year 8. So you're always a year behind financially in schools anyway, which is why that's an overall, that's like a whole other thing. But you want to get bums on seats. So for you to get marked inadequate, it kind of shakes on both. You know what I mean? Like people might not want to go to your school, but that inadequate is not a true reflection of your school. It's a reflection of somebody coming in for 2 or 3 days and looking at a small section of your school.
Thanks for touching on that. There's a lot to unpack there, and we might have to have another conversation at maybe the next stag or the next get together. But let's now wrap up with the other thing: future
of education.
Yeah. Final thoughts on that?
Doomed.
That's positive. That's positive. Yes. Very positive.
And the future of education. All right. So my thing, and this is very, very much a personal opinion, no facts or figures. I personally believe the future of education changes with teacher retention. You've got to keep teachers happy, and you've got to have a workforce that reflects the school body. You can't have, and like obviously it's not said in any derogatory terms, but you can't have a white head teacher with a white school leadership team telling Mohammed and Ali and Zainab and Essen how to be, because culturally our worlds are different, economically our worlds are different, and although you might want the best for me, like I wouldn't take that away from anyone. Like your role, it's a vocation. You don't go into it for the sake of it. So you genuinely do want the best for you, but you can't identify with my struggle. You don't know or understand the upbringing and the culture of home. And it's another thing like that. I mean, we're gonna try and wrap it up, but what's safeguarding to one person is normal cultural norm, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at it
and we shouldn't relax them.
Yeah,
but
we
the way we approach it,
the way that we approach,
yeah.
you know, it's a bigger dynamic, and this is what I'm saying, and this is where young people don't trust teachers
that don't represent them
because they don't represent them. So it's like I could tell you that, oh, my mum's having a go at me again. Why? Because I didn't do this, and that. Now, teacher A, who's 23 and raised in Watford, might turn around and be like, no, that's wrong. Da, 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 da. They talk to me and I'll be like, why? but boy, the mommy told you though that da, 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 da. You get me? And it's just those relationships of trust make all the difference. I really struggle to see bad kids. Me personally, I struggle. Don't get me wrong. There's some wrong ones. There's some wrong ones. Right. But I struggle to see bad kids. I see a lot more kids who haven't got the bridge connected. And where it's almost like empathizing. So I'll empathize with you. I want to understand, because there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy, in some cases, keep your empathy, bro. I don't need your empathy. And I don't really need your sympathy either. I want you to understand me and respect what I'm saying.
And that comes from at least the large majority of that can come from keeping teachers in the service, in the industry, that are from that community,
from the community,
understand it, and over time as well, because it's the same in health. Like over time, you obviously, the more you're doing something, you build up an experience and a skill set that's good. But if you're not being retained and you burn out or whatever, and you go to a different thing, then the sector doesn't retain that experience and knowledge, and everyone suffers. That's the whole thing.
Everyone suffers because the experience is going. Like general teacher, like culture out the window. The general retention for teacher, you're looking at 3 to 5 years at the moment.
That's low.
This is my point.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I had people on my training here. I say people, there was one girl, or one woman I should say, that I remember at the end of my course, she was like, I'm not teaching. And I was just after the training. Yeah.
And I think I hear them knocking in the room for the for the pre-drinks. But in a nutshell, what's the reason? Like burnout, or they're not supported?
A lot of it's burnout, expectation. Because you're not just a teacher no more. You're a teacher, a social worker, a parent, carer, a sibling. We're demanded. There's a lot of demand for what we get. And I think as well, when the money doesn't reflect it, the support doesn't reflect it, and the person who's in power is not reflecting of what you want these people to be, it's a bit of a messy battle. It's a bit of a messy battle.
But hopefully we can end on a positive note.
Let's end on a positive.
Are you sticking in the fight for a little bit longer? I mean, at least in the sector, whether we're teaching side or non-teaching side.
So I am.
Good to hear that.
I am. It's a positive. It's still a positive. It doesn't sound like positive. It's positive. I struggled in my school only because of the dynamic of culture. It's very different to what I am. but it's forced me to relearn certain things, which is good. Like professionally, it's forced me to have to learn how to readdress and speak to people differently and address things differently and diplomatically and whatnot. But again, with that being said, I don't represent them. And all of a sudden, the tables have turned. All of a sudden. Because I'm good at what I do. Like, I blow my own trumpet. But I'm one of 2 black men in a school that is predominantly white children and staff.
And there's a very interesting counterfactual question here about how far do you tailor public sector services to communities, and does that lead to entrenched community dynamics? Because if you're saying very broadly, loosely, only black teachers for black communities, or etc.,
it gets tricky, doesn't it?
And that's an interesting cliffhanger to end on, because I know we got to refill that cup. And
but I do think that's the interesting part, because then you're almost pigeonholing where people can work, and then it's almost like there was an argument in my school. Sorry, I know we're gonna wrap it. There was an argument in my school where there was a bit of a racial issue. One of the teachers suggested a black teacher dealt with it, and the black teacher's like, "Why am I dealing with it? Why can't a white person deal with a racial issue?" And it's like little things like that, and I'm like, I'd like to deal with it, not because I'm a black man, I want to deal with racism, but I can explain to the child why it's so offensive, because I understand why it's offensive.
We could do this all day.
Because
the second part of that question is, well, what about white allies? And anyway, I think we got to go to a party upstairs.
I want to talk about allies though. Yo, part 2.
I appreciate that.
Part 2, because I need to talk about allies, because allies is an important one, really.